I sat down on these steps this morning, just sat. No phone, no one around, just me and the sound of the city waking up. And I thought about something a man told me once. He said, "People like you just don't know how to be grateful." I was young. I didn't say anything back. But I've been thinking about that sentence for 30 years. People like you. Like he already knew me. Like the street I grew up on was a verdict. Like where I came from was a character flaw. I'm 55 now. I walk slower. I think harder. And I've learned that most people only see the surface of a life. They see the anger. They see the fist raised. They don't see the 9-year-old boy behind it, the one who was just scared. I was always just scared. I lost my first real friend when I was 22. His name was Marcus. We called him Dre, not because of anyone famous, just because it fit him. Dre used to say it was going to build something. He didn't know what, but he said it like he meant it. He died on a Tuesday. Nobody made a speech. Nobody put his name on a building. He just wasn't there anymore. And I kept walking. Then there was a girl named Kezia. She wrote poetry, real poetry. Not the kind people perform to impress, the kind that comes out like bleeding. She showed me one once on a torn piece of notebook paper. I still remember the first line. It said, "My mother never learned my name in the dark." I didn't know what to say, so I just held on to that piece of paper. 3 months later, she was gone, not dead, just gone. Swallowed by something I didn't understand then. I understand it now. It was silence. The world just stayed quiet about people like her. And silence, for some people, is the same thing as a grave. I kept writing, even when I had no address. Even when I was eating whatever I could find, I kept writing because it was the only thing that was mine. No one could take a verse from my head. No one could evict a rhyme. So I wrote, and I performed, and eventually, somebody heard me. But that's not where the story begins. That's where most people think it begins. The truth is, it began at a hallway, a fluorescent lit hallway with linoleum floors and a broken drinking fountain. I was about 16. There was a counselor named Mrs. Aldrich. She called me in one day. She slid a pamphlet across her desk. It said, "Vocational Opportunities for At-Risk Youth." At risk. I looked at that word for a long time. At risk. Like I was a weather event. Like I was a fire somebody hadn't put out yet. She said, "There are programs that can help boys like you." Boys like you. There it was again. That sentence. I didn't say anything. I took the pamphlet. I threw it away outside her office. Because what she was really saying was, you are the problem. Not the system, not the silence, not the fact that my mother worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford the school supplies list. Me. I was the problem, and if I just followed the right steps, I could become less of a problem. I walked out of that school that day, and I didn't go back for 2 weeks. Nobody called, nobody knocked, nobody noticed. That's the part they never tell you. Nobody notices when you disappear. Not at first, and by the time they do, you've already learned to live without being noticed. You learn to make yourself small, or you learn to make yourself loud. I chose loud. Loud kept me alive. Loud meant someone had to look. I'm 55 now, and last spring I went back to that neighborhood, not for any big reason. I just needed to see it. I was standing on the corner where we used to hang, and this kid came up to me. Couldn't have been more than 17. He had this look in his eyes. Not anger, something behind the anger, something I recognized. He said, "You're him, right?" I nodded. He said, "Why'd you make it?" Not congratulations. Not, "Can I have your autograph?" Why'd you make it? Like survival was a mystery he was trying to solve. Like he needed the equation. Because he was still in it. Still in the middle of something I'd gotten out of. I said, "Sit down." He looked at me sideways. He said, "I don't got time." I said, "Then I'll stand." So we stood there on that corner, and he started talking, not to impress me, not because I was anybody, but because I think he hadn't talked to anybody in a while. His name was Elijah. He went by a name I won't say here, but his real name was Elijah. He told me his mom had moved 3 states away. He said it flat, like it was weather. He said his older brother was inside. Said he'd been staying with a friend, but the friend's landlord found out, so now he gestured at the street. I said, "Where are you sleeping?" He shrugged, said, "Around." Around. I know what around means. Around means a doorway if it's dry. Around means a park bench if the cops don't come. Around means not sleeping, just waiting for morning. I said, "What do you want?" He looked at me like it was a trick, like nobody had ever asked him that before without a catch. He said real quiet, "I just want to stop running." I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't that. I said, "From what?" He said, "Everything." I spent the next 2 weeks trying to find this kid a place. I called a program downtown. They said there was a waiting list, 6 to 8 weeks. I said, "He doesn't have 6 to 8 weeks." They said, "I understand." They didn't understand. I called a shelter on the east side. They said they only took men over 21. I said, "He's 17. They said, "Try the Juvenile Services Office." I called the Juvenile Services Office. I was on hold for 40 minutes. Then the line disconnected. I called back. Different person. They asked me to describe my relationship to the youth. I said, "I'm trying to help him." They said, "Are you a legal guardian?" I said, "No." They said, "Are you a licensed social worker?" I said, "No." They said, "Sir, without a formal relationship established." I stopped listening. I went back to the corner. Elijah was there. He looked at me. He could tell. He said, "It's fine." Like he'd already known. Like this was just the next chapter in a book he'd been reading his whole life. The chapter where the system says, "Sorry." I sat down on the curb. First time in a long time I didn't know what to say. He sat down next to me. We just sat. After a while he said, "You know what's funny?" I said, "What?" He said, "Nobody asks us what we're good at." I looked at him. He said, "They ask what we need. They ask what we did. They ask what program we want. But nobody ever just says, 'What are you good at?'" I said, "What are you good at, Elijah?" He thought about it. He said, "Drawing. I draw everything, faces mostly. I drew everybody I ever lost, so I don't forget them." He reached into his jacket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it slow, like it was something fragile. It was a portrait. I recognized the technique. Cross-hatching. Careful. Patient. The face of a woman, old and tired and beautiful. He said, "My grandmother." I held it. I said, "This is real." He said, "She died before I could show her." We stayed quiet. A lot of things happened in the weeks after that. Some of them good. Some of them not. I found a program that said they might be able to squeeze him in. Temporary housing, structured environment, skills training. He went. For 3 weeks, he went. Then I got a message, short, 3 words. I had to leave. I called. He picked up. I said, "What happened?" He said, "The guy in the next bed, it just wasn't safe, man. I couldn't sleep. And when you can't sleep, you can't think. And when you can't think—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I said, "Come stay with me." He was quiet. He said, "I don't want to be somebody's project." That hit me somewhere specific, somewhere old. I said, "You're not a project. You're a person. And right now, I've got a couch." He came. For 6 weeks, he slept on my couch. He drew every night, pages and pages of faces. Some people I recognized, most I didn't. He said each one was someone from his block, someone who didn't make it out. He said, "If I draw them, they're not completely gone." I started to feel something shift in him, slow, like a tide, but I also started to feel something pull in me. Old things, old fears, the fear that whatever you build can still be taken. That progress is not a promise, that the street has a long memory. One night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my kitchen. It was 3 in the morning, and I thought about all the names, Marcus, Kezia, every kid I'd known who didn't make it. And I thought, what is the point of all of it if the same thing just keeps happening? A different kid, same corner, same waiting list, same fluorescent hallway, same silence. I called a friend. She picked up. I said, "I don't know if I'm doing anything real." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I mean, what changes? Elijah is one kid. There are 1,000 Elijahs, and I am one man, and I am tired." She was quiet. Then she said, "You're not supposed to save everyone. You're supposed to show one person that one person cares. That's it. That's the whole job." I sat with that. I said, "What if it's not enough?" She said, "It's always enough. For that one person, it's always enough." I went back to the couch. Elijah was asleep. He'd left his drawings on the table. I sat and looked at them, face after face, all those people who'd been invisible, now permanent, now on paper, now real. I thought about what he'd said, about nobody asking what we're good at, about being seen, not as a case, not as a risk, not as a problem to be managed, just seen. I think that's the thing nobody talks about. Not enough food, not enough beds, not enough programs. All of that is real. All of that matters. But underneath all of it, there is something even more basic. People need to know that their life has weight, that they matter to someone who isn't being paid to say so. That's it. That's the whole equation. I didn't figure that out in a recording studio. I didn't figure it out on a stage. I figured it out on a kitchen floor at 3 in the morning, looking at drawings made by a 17-year-old boy who'd been told his whole life that he was a problem. Elijah got into an art program 6 months later, a real one, funded, a teacher who called him by his name. He sends me a drawing every few weeks, always faces, always careful, always patient. He signs them now, not his street name, Elijah, his real name. There are kids out there tonight on corners I've stood on, in doorways I've slept in hallways I've walked, and they are not problems. They are not at risk. They are not boys like you. They are people with names, with things they're good at, with faces they're trying not to forget. The question is not whether the system is broken. We know it is. The question is, what are you willing to do about one person? Just one. Because sometimes one person is how everything changes. Sometimes one couch, one phone call, one conversation on a corner where you say, "What are you good at?" and actually wait for the answer. That's not nothing. That's everything. I'm 55. I've seen what happens when nobody waits for the answer. I've drawn those faces too, in my own way, in my own words, and I'm still drawing, I'm still asking, and I'm still on the corner every single day.